Let's go ahead and start by turning over to Deuteronomy 30 and verse 19. We'll start in verse 19, Deuteronomy 30. And we read there in verse 19 of Deuteronomy 30, I call heaven and earth as witness today against you, that I have set before you life and death, blessing and cursing. Therefore choose life, that both you and your descendants may live. So a lot of us are really familiar with this statement that is written. It's really interesting when you look at this statement. What we're going to be focusing on today is the power of choice. God set out before us the power of choice. He gave us a choice of life and death, but we want to focus on that today, the power of choice. When you think about it, choice is the one thing in life that God has given us all control over, right? We have the power to choose. That doesn't mean our choices will be easy, but we still have a power to choose. I chose that's the title for the message today too, the power of choice. And in that, the power of choice, there's a reason for it. There's actually two things within that statement, the power of choice, two ways of looking at it if you want to see it that way. We have the power of choice, and the choices we make have power. We have the power of choice, and the choices that we make carry power. They have the power to affect others, don't they? So those are the two elements of the power of choice that I looked at when I was thinking about this. I want to focus on the first one, and that is our power of choice that God has given us, the power of choice. We may not control the situation that we're put in. We may not have a choice in the situation we're in, but we still have a choice at the end of it, of how we respond to that situation that we're in. So let's think of a couple biblical examples to start off with. What about Joseph? You know, Joseph didn't choose to be thrown into a pit by his brothers and then sold as a slave. Joseph didn't choose to have his master's wife assault him and, have to go through that and then be thrown in jail for many years. He didn't choose any of those things that happened to him, right? Those were actually the effects of somebody else's choices, the power, the effect of somebody else's choices. But how did Joseph deal with it? Through all those things, he chose to do what was right. That was his choice. Maybe not the circumstances he was in, but how he dealt with those circumstances was his choice, just as it's our choice. Then we have Job. Job didn't choose to be afflicted, but he made the choice to not follow his wife's advice and curse God, but rather to honor God and to follow God, even through all the afflictions. That was his choice. That was the power of his choice. We've got Daniel. We've got Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. We can go on and on. There's countless stories you can read throughout the whole Bible, New Testament, Old Testament. One thing, one common element that all these stories have in common is choice. Not how they got to where they were, not what happened to them. It's the choice that they made. That's the common element for all of them. Even in the face of death, all of these people I just mentioned, they had the power to choose life, didn't they? Even in the face of death, they had the power to choose life. And that may seem kind of odd when we think about it in that context, but let's go ahead and turn over to Matthew 10 and read verses 26 through 28, and it actually becomes a little bit clearer. Matthew 10, starting in verse 26. Therefore do not fear them, for there's nothing covered that will not be revealed, and nothing hidden that will not be known. Whatever I tell you in the dark, speak in the light, and whatever you hear in the ear, preach on the housetops. And do not fear those who can kill the body, but cannot kill the soul, but rather fear him who is able to destroy both the soul and the body in hell. So before this was even said by Christ, in the Old Testament, the faithful were following this. They were choosing life even in the face of death. And here's a Spider-Man quote, but it's actually a reference to the Bible too. With great power comes great responsibility. Anybody remember that one? Yeah. They credit it to Spider-Man. David Jr.'s got it. They credit it to the series of Spider-Man, but actually the principle is found in Luke 12:48, if you want to write that down too. It is a biblical principle. So, What hinders us? What hinders us from making the right choices? Why does it seem that so many nowadays in the world, maybe even in the church, are making poor choices? Why? What hinders us? I was thinking about this, and to me, these are two things that jumped out, and I'd like to share it with you. And the first one is blaming others for your choices by not owning the power of choice. You've been given the power of choice, but a lot of times we blame others. So what does that look like? I'll just say a couple statements we commonly hear, and variations of these statements all the time. They make me so angry. Really? Do they have the power to make you angry? Or is that a choice you're making? Think about it. It's a choice. They didn't make you angry. Now, if you choose to be angry, it's probably because you were hurt by something they did, by one of their choices that had the power to affect you. That's the second aspect. But you still make the choice to become angry. What about, well, they did it first, so this is why I responded this way, to justify an a bad response, right? Well, if they wouldn't have done that, then I wouldn't have done this. We hear that all the time too, right? Is that true? So are you a puppet on a string? Or do you have a choice? You have a choice. No matter what somebody else does, you choose how to respond. That is your power. That is the power of your choice. And it can't be put on anybody else, can't be blamed on anybody else. When we take that ownership and own the power of choice, things will drastically change in our life for the better. They will drastically change, because then we have to address it on our side, not on somebody else's. The second thing is abdicating your power to others in the belief that you can avoid the responsibility of choice. A lot of people will just say, well, I'll just let them make all the choices, or I'll just do that. And when they do that, there's this false sense that, well, now whatever happens is on their shoulders. No, that's not true. You chose to give them your power of choice. You will be responsible for the outcome. That was a choice. Even though you think you didn't make a choice, you made a choice. When you choose to let somebody else decide things for you, you made a choice to let somebody else decide things for you. We're all going to stand before God, and He's going to ask us what our choice was. What was our decision? We're not going to be able to say, I let this person make the decision for me. So let's think about, the three examples I just gave. Let's flash back to Joseph, Job, Daniel, Shadrach, Meshach, Abednego. Could you imagine any of them making those statements? Well, I was so angry because they did something. They made me angry. Or, they did it first, so this justified me doing something else. Well, he was in power. God placed him in power, the king over us. So I just abdicated to him. So it's his choice. No. None of them took that path, right? All of them had that choice. Of all these three examples that we commonly hear in life, they all had that choice. And they made the right choice. They made the right choice, but it was their choice. So why did they make it? And why should we make it? Let's go ahead and turn over to Romans 14 and read verse 11 and 12. Romans 14, verse 11 and 12. And this is what I just referred to recently, but let's read out of Scripture. Romans 14, verse 11. For it is written, as I live, says the Lord, every knee shall bow to me, and every tongue shall confess to God. So then each of us shall give an account of himself to God. We are accountable for our decisions and for our choices. We have been given the power of choice. We will be accountable for that power and how we used it and the choices we made. So maybe there's still some of us out there who think, we have another reason. Things are harder on us. We've gone through things that other people haven't gone through. You just don't know. And you know, if you're just talking one-on-one, if we're comparing to one another, it's easy to get in that frame of mind. Because we go, wow, you've had it easy, you just don't understand how hard I've had it over here. So I'm justified in some of these decisions I've made that were poor because I've had a harder life. And you know, it's easy when we bounce back and forth in comparison to others, but you know, there's a specific reason we're told in the Bible not to compare ourselves to others. There's only one that we compare to, and that's Christ. There's only one. He's the standard. He's the benchmark. He's what we compare to. So let's do that. Let's read about it. Let's see what Christ did in the face of many of the things that we talked about. How was his power of choice? What was Christ's power of choice? When he had others' choices affect him, when the power that others had to choose affected him in a negative way, what was his power of choice? And let's go ahead and read that in Hebrews, and we'll start in verse 1 and read through verse 4. So Hebrews 12. Hebrews 12, verse 1 through 4. Therefore, we also, since we are surrounded by a great cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Looking to Christ, this is our comparative. This is our comparative. Looking to Christ, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising shame, didn't worry about the shame that people cast on him. Think about that. He wasn't worried about what people thought of him. Despised the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. For consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls. Don't compare to others, compare to Christ. You have not yet resisted to bloodshed, striving against sin. You know, that's our comparison. And you think about it, the two things that I talked about, the power of choice. Christ used his power of choice to follow God and to make right decisions, regardless of what was going on around him. It didn't matter that people were persecuting him. It didn't matter that people were shaming him. He still made the right choice. The power of choice was his, and he chose to do what was right. But the second element also of what Christ did, the power of his choice, has been a blessing to all mankind. Because of his choice, that power has affected all mankind and will affect all mankind because of his choice. Salvation, forgiveness of sins, and the kingdom coming to this earth. That was by his choice. That's the power of his choice, the effect that comes out of that. So, with this all in mind, I've got a question for you to finish. What are you going to do with your power of choice?